Pat is a retired Unity minister, founding and senior minister of Unity Ministry in Motion. She's an alternative Unity ministry, which she formed to nurture and coach seeds of unity in Canada to fruition. She has served as the regional representative and consultant for Unity Canada, a certified ministry consultant and transition ministry consultant, chair of the ethics review team of Unity Worldwide Ministries, and a member of Unity Worldwide Ministries standards team. She is also a certified spiritual coach, a healthy congregations trainer, and a quantum process coach. Reverend Pat is also a mentor appointed by Unity Canada to guide and coach established Unity ministries, and has served in that capacity here at Unity Kitchener and several Unity centers. Reverend Pat now lives in Beamsville, Ontario, with her Havapoo dog, Gracie, who attends all church functions and spreads unconditional love wherever she goes. Reverend Pat has 3 adult children and 9 grandchildren in Burlington, Calgary, and San Diego. As you can see, she is passionate about unity and helping to create thriving and dynamic unity ministries. Welcome, Reverend Pat. Say yes to the mess.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Actually, you know what? Things have changed a bit since I sent that to you. I have resigned from the ethics review team, and I'm no longer I'm no longer a member of standards. I'm not the regional consultant anymore. So it's really interesting how things change quickly.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so today's talk is yes to the mess. No, not yes to the dress. You know, if any of you have watched that on TV, but yes to the mess. And today we're going to look at our consciousness and how it affects every area of our life. As Eric Butterworth says, if you're not happy with the things that are repeatedly happening in your life, or with the direction in which you seem to be moving, you can turn it around. But first, you must understand that it is your life, that you live in a world of your own thoughts, and that you can change your life by altering your thoughts whenever you really want to do so. This is not to say it's easy, but it's possible. For example, the situation that Robinson Crusoe found himself in when he was shipwrecked on a desert island. When he woke up stranded on the beach, I hope you all know the story of Robinson Crusoe, there wasn't much for him to be happy about except for the fact that he was alive. I'm imagining when he realized what was happening after getting over the shock, he took stock of his situation and mentally drew up 2 columns. What was the bad and what was the good? So on the bad side, he said he was cast on a desolate island, but the good part was he was alive. He was apart from human society. This was before he found Friday, his man Friday, but he wasn't starving. He had lots to eat. He only had the clothes on his back, but he was in a hot climate where he didn't really need clothes. He didn't have any means of defense, but he didn't see anything to defend himself against. He had no one to talk to, but the ship was so near to the shore that he could get everything he needed from it that he needed to survive. So I think he concluded there wasn't any circumstance in the world so miserable that he couldn't find something to be grateful for, to say yes to. What does it mean to say yes to life? To yes, I can't even say it, to yes your thing, your way through. I was thinking about the things that we say yes to in life. For example, would you please sign for this package? How many times are we hearing that these days? Would you like to enter into this free drawing? Do you want 0% interest on your new car? Some of these questions we might be reluctant to say yes to because we realize there might be some ramifications by saying yes, but Really, we all have a choice as to what we want our answer to be. We can look at our circumstances and say no, refuse to accept what's happening, deny the opportunities to open our minds to the good that's in every situation, to resist it. So some of these might be, do you want to be enlightened? Do you want to be prosperous? Do you want to be empowered? Do you want to be inspiring? Do you want to be at peace? They sound like great questions, don't they? Don't we want to say yes to all of them? Maybe, because there's stuff that'll be happening. And we want to fight some of it. The truth is, the harder we push something away, the more we pull these circumstances to us. What we resist persists. That's an old unity saying, a truth saying, not even just unity. Can anybody relate to this? There's a great story that I heard that really illustrates this concept. Do any of you remember when milkmen delivered bottles of milk to the doorstep? This true story happened when that still happened, not this many years ago when it was a horse-drawn cart. Do you know, I still remember when the milkman had a horse and a cart, and in the wintertime, the milk would be frozen. But so many times my brother used to go and jump on the cart with the mailman and help him with the milkman and help him deliver. And the funny thing was the horse knew exactly where to stop. The milkman didn't even have to tell it. That horse knew the route better than anybody else. Well, so the milkman that I'm talking about is Ben, and he had a truck. And this woman was telling the story, said, when Ben delivered my milk to my home that morning, he wasn't his usual sunny self. He was the epitome of gloom. As he dropped off his milk from his wire carrier, it took slow, careful questioning to extract the story from him. With some embarrassment, he told me 2 customers had left town without paying. One, and he was going to have to cover their losses. One of the debtors only owed $10, but the other was $179 in arrears, had left no forwarding address. Ben was so mad at himself, at his stupidity for allowing this bill to grow so large. He says she was a pretty woman with 6 children and another on the way. Oh my goodness. She was always saying, I'm going to pay you soon when my husband gets another job. And I believed her. What a fool I was. I thought I was doing a good thing, but I've learned my lesson. I've been had. All this woman could say is, I'm so sorry. The next time I saw him, his anger seemed worse. He bristled as he talked about the messy young kids who had drunk up all his milk. This charming family had turned into a parcel of brats. I repeated my condolences and just let the matter rest. But when Ben left, I found myself caught up in his problem and longed to help, worried that this incident would sour a warm person. I mulled over what to do. Then I thought of what my grandmother used to say. She'd say, when someone has taken from you, give it to them, and you can never be robbed. Interesting thought, eh? The next time Bill delivered the milk, I told him I had a way to make him feel better about the $179. I said, nothing will do that. He said, but tell me anyway. Give the woman the milk. Make it a present to the kids who needed it. He says, are you kidding? He replied, I don't even give my wife a birthday gift that expensive. She said, the Bible says I was a stranger and you took me in. You just took her in with all her little children. He says, don't you mean she took me in? The trouble with you is it wasn't your $179. I let the subject drop, but I still believed in my suggestion. We'd joke about it when he'd come. I'd say, have you given her the milk yet? And he'd say, no, but I'm thinking of giving my wife a $179 present, unless another pretty mother starts playing on my sympathies. Every time I'd ask the question, though, we started laughing about it. He seemed to lighten up a bit more. Then one day it happened. He arrived with a tremendous smile and a glint in his eyes. I did it. I gave her the milk as a present. It wasn't easy, but actually, what did I have to lose? It was gone, wasn't it? I'd already paid for the company for it. I said, yeah, but you've really got to mean it in your heart. He said, I know, and I do. I feel better. That's why I have this good feeling. Those kids had lots of milk on their cereal just because of me. Had Ben learned to yes his way through a problem? What do you think? Do you think it changed other aspects of his life too? So when you say yes to the mess, you're changing your consciousness. You're switching from fear to love. And so many of us shut ourselves off from experiencing the peace, the inspiration, the prosperity in which we can live, move, and have our being. God can't bring good into our experience when our mind and heart are ungratefully and ungraciously closed to it. This isn't about forgiveness. Ben wasn't being told to forgive the woman, but to do a loving act to her in his mind. In fact, to be grateful to her for an opportunity to say yes. She didn't even know about it. When we express love and compassion, though, it generates the energy that lets us appreciate how good life is. Not only that, it awakens us to a greater awareness of the good that's everywhere present and at work in our behalf. Do you remember the story in the Gospel of John about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead? Just a second, I've got to get my Bible. I forgot. So this wasn't the man. Lazarus, for those of you that don't remember, was the brother of Mary and Martha. And he had been very sick, and Martha had sent people to get Jesus and say, come right away, Lazarus is going to die. And then the next thing that happened is, and Jesus was busy. He was preaching. And so he didn't get there until 2 days later. And apparently Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days already. So apparently his body had already started to decompose, which wasn't very pretty in that time. And Martha was mad, and she said to him, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But all right, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Martha was saying yes to the fact that Lazarus had died. And so Mary came out, and she was coming to see Jesus and saying, I'm so glad you're here. And Jesus began to weep because she thought it doesn't tell us why Jesus wept. And we think it was because Mary was so upset. And Jesus got kind of caught up in her. But then she said, no, never mind. Jesus again greatly disturbed. So I'm going to read to you. He came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha said, oh, God, there's already a stench because he's been in there 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward. So that's him looking inward up to a higher consciousness than his human consciousness. He turned into that Christ consciousness that we talk about. And he said, Lord, he said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I've said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so they may believe that you sent them. When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to him, unbind him and let him go. Wow, what a story, eh? Wow. But what I wanted to focus on in this story was the fact that Jesus realized he didn't need to say, "Thank you, Father," out loud. His whole life and attitude said yes. He just said it to be a role model for those who were there, to be of service to them, to show them how to transform their lives. The more we say yes, the more unshakable our faith becomes, the greater our inner peace, the bigger our capacity to love and to fill our lives with joy. So, how do we start increasing our ability to say yes to the mess? It can be difficult at times. So, here's some different ways. First of all, we can give thanks when it looks that there isn't enough, like Jesus did when he fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. We can give thanks in advance instead of just, with these all these people having demands about what Jesus is feeding them. We can give thanks in advance like he did when he resurrected Lazarus. We can find something to give thanks for in difficult situations. I just had a very interesting time coming back from the week I had at the cottage. My son was flying to San Diego, and I was flying back to Toronto from Montreal. And so we were driving, and I was going very early because his flight left like 3 hours before mine. And I thought, well, I'll just hang out at the airport in Montreal. It's no big deal. 5 minutes before we got to the airport, I got a text from Porter, who was what I was flying from, Porter Airlines, saying that the flight had been canceled due to staff shortage, and they'd rebooked me for Tuesday at 10 a.m. This was Sunday at around 11 o'clock. Can you imagine? Well, I just kind of went, oh, 2 days? They booked me in 2 days. What am I supposed to do in 2 days? With Gracie, with the fact I didn't have any of my medications left because I'd used them all up at the cottage. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Well, so because we were only 5 minutes away, I went to the desk to check in. Well, the poor people there, because I was so early, I was the second one in line. But the people that check you in have absolutely no authority to do anything. All she could do was call her supervisor, and she kept phoning her supervisor. Supervisor wasn't answering. And we were just all kind of standing there. She went and got a chair for me to sit down. And finally, the supervisor arrived 2 hours later and started trying to deal with all this, what was going on. There were some very angry people there. I wasn't, because I was going to be giving this talk today, I thought, okay, obviously this is a mess. I have to say yes to it. What can I do? Well, you know what they did? I mean, they took my suitcase behind their desk, which of course they would never do, so that I wouldn't have to haul it around when I took Gracie outside or went to get some lunch. They looked after it for me, which was so nice. Anyway, finally the supervisor came, and there was one person ahead of me, and the best that they could do for her was to give her a flight the next day at 7 a.m. So I was talking to my daughter and my son while all of this was going on, and my daughter says, well, do you want me to come and get you? Finally, after 2 hours, I said yes. So she drove from the cottage, which was an hour and a half away, came and got me, and we went back to the cottage, which actually, it was so funny. She says, well, you can't come back because I've taken the sheets off your bed. So she hadn't washed them yet, thank goodness. So I went back and unpacked, and we had a lovely afternoon, and the next day was Monday, and it was raining and miserable, and they said, we're going to go back now, because they were planning on coming back on Tuesday anyway. So it was so interesting, just accepting what was happening. It was a mess, so said yes to it. So it's really interesting. So don't be afraid to go off the deep end. It means that you know, you're truly giving yourself to something. Jim and Nancy Rosemurgy say that one of the world's difficulties is that many people are lukewarm with their lives. They stay in the shallow end of the pool. The shallow end is okay for splashing around, but it's not for the serious swimmer. They say, consider that the deep end is where there's buoyancy. Ocean-going vessels are out of place in the harbor. They have to be pushed about by tugs. They're meant for the high seas. This is saying we are meant for the high seas. So if we're going to dive into the deep end, say yes in a big way. The second way is we can keep a gratitude journal. So many times we hear about this, don't we? Taking time at the end of the day to write down 5 things that happened that we're grateful for. Especially things that didn't look too good to begin with, but once we said yes to them, we can see in a totally different way. In fact, a really good exercise to pick 5 of the awful things that happened and find the yes in them. I love that. You know, we can see here's some of the things we can be grateful for. I guess that was me in the airplane. We can use the rocking chair test. Imagine yourself as an old person nearing the end of your life. And as you sit and rock on your porch and contemplate your life and the attitude you had towards whatever is bugging you right now, ask yourself that if you had decided to say yes to it, how would this decision have affected the course of your life? We can say the words out loud. Thank you, God. Yes, God. Let's just say it right now. Say yes. 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 By the way, there's more to Ben's story. 2 weeks later, Ben almost ran up the walk. He said, wait till you hear this. He explained he'd been on a different route covering for another milkman, and he heard his name being called, and he looked over his shoulder, saw a woman running down the street waving money. He recognized her immediately. It was the pretty woman with all the kids, the one who hadn't paid her bill. She was carrying an infant in a tiny blanket. She'd had that baby. Ben, wait a minute, she called. I've got money for you. Ben stopped the truck and got out. She said, I'm so sorry. I've really been meaning to pay you. She explained her husband had come home one night, announced he'd found a cheaper apartment. He'd also started a night job. And when that happened, she'd forgotten to leave a forwarding address, but she'd been saving. And she said, here's $20 towards the bill. That's all right, Ben said. He said to her, it's been paid. Paid? She exclaimed. What do you mean? Who paid it? And he said, I did. Ben, you know, she looked at him as if he was the angel Gabriel, and she started to cry. Well, he said, I said to Ben, what did you do? He said, I didn't know what to do, so I put an arm around her, and before I knew it was, I was trying to cry, and I didn't know what was going on, and then I thought of all of those kids having milk on their cereal, and you know what? I was really glad you talked me into this. So did you take the $20? Heck no, he said. I gave her the milk as a present, didn't I? What a wonderful opportunity to experience accepting what is and changing our consciousness. So let's prepare for our meditation. Say a tender yes. I relax. I breathe. I focus on my heart. I let go. I say yes to peace. I say yes to being empowered by my thoughts and words. I say yes to being enlightened, to lighten up, to allow the light of God shine from me. I say yes to being inspired by all the beauty I see around me. I say yes to prosperity in all areas of my life. I say yes to God. I picture myself sitting in the rocking chair, thinking about what's going on in my life right now that's disturbing me. Is there something there? What can I say yes to about it? Maybe what's happening is exactly what's supposed to be happening in order for the greater good to manifest. It doesn't have to be a big yes. I can start at the shallow end and splash around until I get used to the water, and as long as I don't stay there, as long as I get into the deep end and dive deep below the surface of my annoyance. Is it possible that I only see part of the picture? That I have no idea how things have to happen in order for divine order to be established? I can do this. I can say yes to God. God is here with me, with you. God is always with you. God is always you. God is in awe, as awe. Our life is our message, and our message is yes.